Hello and welcome along to the Scottish Youth Film Festival. My name's Stuart Reid, I'm a children's author and I write about bums and bogies and big bottom butts, yucky stuff. I've got 8 books out and it's my job to engage children with reading and writing and stories and just help them unlock their imaginations. What we're going to be talking about for the next little while is writing stories, creative writing. It's about taking the ideas that are in your head and just letting them explode, getting your stories down on paper. Now, the first 3 things we're going to talk about is plot, setting and characters. These are the basics that you're going to need to create your stories. And they're easy to consider because the first one, plot is the what. What's happening? What is your story all about? What's going on in your tale? So you've got to think about what kind of story you would like. The second one is another question, setting. Where are you going to set your story? Where does your story take place? It might be up a mountain, it might be in a forest, it might be in a fire station, it might be in a football stadium. You write about what you love. You think about what you enjoy doing. You might be a gymnast, you might be a singer. Could you write a story about you getting a letter, arriving on your doorstep, inviting you onto the X Factor auditions? How would you feel? First of all, you'd be excited. Wow, it's so fantastic. But then maybe you start getting a little bit of butterflies in your tummy. How does it feel? Maybe you lose your voice the day before you go to the studios. How does it feel going to the theatre with 2,000 people watching you and all the judges there? So you set it in a theatre. You think about what you love. Any of you guys out there, girls out there playing Fortnite? Could you write a story about how it would feel if you were zapped inside your video game and set it there? Now don't say Jumanji, because that's my idea. I've been doing this for about 10 years and Jumanji stole my idea. But you could write it in your favourite video game. Setting, where? Actually, it's not just where. Setting has got 2 questions. It's the where and when. When do you want to set your story? You could set it now. You could set it in this day and age. Or you could change the time zone. You could set it when? Let's set it 100 years ago. What would it be like back in the Victorian days? We could set it 2,000 years ago. Let's think about Roman times. Or we set it in the future. What's it going to like 100 years ahead? I know you guys all went to school. You know exactly what school looks like. You go to school quite frequently. You see what the classroom looks like. And I bet you your classroom is packed full of colour and imagination. You've got lots of stuff on the walls. You've got projects. You might do the Victorians. School's such a fun place to come that unlocks all your creativity. However, change the time zone. School didn't always look so bright and colourful. Nothing was allowed on the walls. If you go back 100 or 150 years to the Victorian times, they didn't put anything on the walls because teachers didn't want to overstimulate children. Teachers could be really mean. If you go back 100 years ago, ask your mum and dad or your grands and grandpas, have you ever heard of the belt? Teachers, if you were talking in class, you got pulled out the front. Teachers were really mean. If your handwriting was rubbish, if you made a scrawl, if you made a mess, if you were whispering to your friend, you've got a little story, right? When I was in primary 4, the very first time I got the belt, I forgot my tie. That was it. I didn't do anything really bad. I'd been playing football outside. I got brought into the classroom and the teacher went, "Young man, where is the rest of your uniform?" And I went, "Oh, I've left it outside." She went, "Right, come and get the belt." I got 2 lashes. For nothing. So it could be really, really strict. You can change the time zone and attitudes and the way people live and work. Totally. The blackboard, the chalkboard. In schools, teachers didn't have fancy TVs, they didn't have projectors like you guys have got, or whiteboards. They used an old-fashioned chalkboard and the teacher would write up on the chalkboard and you'd have to copy, writing down into you, not even a jotter, you'd have to do it on your own little slate, and that's where you practice your handwriting. So, in the olden days, totally different. Attitudes were different. When? What do you think schools in the future might look like? You might have one great big building that's got 100 stories. Maybe you guys come to school in your flying cars. In fact, that's the spooky thing, because next year when we do the Tokyo Olympic Games, they're actually going to light the Olympic torch with a flying car. Toyota have created the very first production model flying car. We think that's going to be in 20, 30, 40 years, but it's happening now. So the future's coming a lot closer than we think, a lot faster. Schools in the future. Maybe you won't have a teacher. Maybe in the future you've got like a robot teacher who's programmed to actually give you the same lessons. In fact, maybe your own teacher has been brought into a studio and filmed from 100 different cameras, and then they'll turn all that film information into like a hologram, and you'll get a beam of light teacher appearing in your classroom. And then all the other teachers that we've got just now will be able to retire and then go and drink orange juice on the beach. The world's going to change, but the setting changes. You think about where and when you want to set your story, and the time zone completely changes the tale itself. Now, the last one that we consider before we start, characters. The question there is, who are your characters going to be? Might be regular boys and girls, might be, you and your friends, or your mum and your dad, or when you go on holiday. Or the characters might be your dog, might be a talking dog, might be a robot. It can be whatever you like. It fits your plot. What's the plot? What's going on? Your setting, where and when. And the characters are who. Who fits the other parts of your story. Now let's look at these three things. Plot, setting and characters. What else, apart from stories and books, would use plot, setting and characters? Movies! Of course! It's obvious. Shrek started life as a book, got turned into a movie. So the characters in Shrek would be Shrek, Donkey, Lord Farquaad, Princess Fiona, the Gingerbread Man. Lots of characters. The setting starts in the swamp, and then it goes to the castle, and then it goes to the forest. So the setting changes 2 or 3 times throughout the whole storyline. But what is the plot? We've got the characters and we've got the setting. What happens in Shrek? Shrek's got to go and rescue Princess Fiona. He brings her back to the castle because she's going to marry Lord Farquaad, but on the journey home, Fiona and Shrek fall in love. It's that simple. Plot, setting, characters. So, books have got plot, setting, characters. Movies have got them as well. Stories need them. What else? TV shows. EastEnders, or Coronation Street, or SpongeBob SquarePants. They all need plot and setting and characters. There's other things as well. What else has got plot and setting and characters? Cartoons. YouTube. A lot of YouTubers use their stories to promote their own brands or entertain people. We've also got video games. Video games nowadays are all about plot and setting and characters. You think about some of the games you play. I mentioned Fortnite earlier. 100 different characters, and you get dropped into the war zone, and you've got to take them out, and it's last man standing. You could play Mario. The characters in Mario are like Mario and Wario and Princess Peach and Bowser. Sometimes it's set in the beach, sometimes it's in a castle, sometimes it's a racing game. FIFA. All the characters are the footballers, we recognise them. The story's told inside stadiums that look exactly like real stadiums, and then the plot is the game. It's the match, it's who scores or who gets sent off and how do you manage the season. So every single video game now is all about plot and setting and characters. And an exciting thing is that we've got some of the biggest video game producers here in Scotland. Now, they don't just come up with a video game, they've got to have a story. Somebody has to write down the story and the action and the scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, all the way through the video game. We're pretty fortunate about that. What else? Poems. My favourite poem is The Jabberwocky, which is featured in the Alice in Wonderland book. It's about a giant dragon terrorising a village. Another one might be Tam O'Shanter. If you've done some of the Rabbie Burns poems in January, Tam O'Shanter is all about 2 guys, they see a witch and a wizard's party going on, and they get spotted, they get chased, and the tail gets ripped off their horse before they cross the river. Some fantastic stories are told through poetry. Okay, 10 years ago, there was a guy called Steven Spielberg, the most famous movie director in the world, probably. He made Jaws, he made Indiana Jones, he made Jurassic Park and all those fantastic movies. But he actually said to a group of students that every cartoon, television programme, movie and even video game starts life as a story. So if any of you guys have ever thought about becoming movie designers, or you want to work in TV, or you want to design video games, start writing stories. Write about what you love. Okay. Anybody recognise this lady? No. I'll give you a little clue. Little cartoon of her. Ah, yes, some of the girls have got it. This lady here is Jacqueline Wilson. Or we should actually say Dame Jacqueline Wilson. She's written 100+ books. She was knighted by the Queen. She writes about everyday life. She writes about mums and dads and brothers and sisters and bullies and things that people recognise. It's not nice when big kids pick on little kids, but little kids have to learn to overcome that, and Jacqueline Wilson writes about it to help children overcome problems they have in their own lives. One of these books, one of the characters dies. Who ever thinks that kids die in children's books? It sounds pretty dark, but actually, sadly, sometimes people die in real life, and Jacqueline Wilson helps children overcome those kind of problems. Recognise this chap? No? Give you a little clue? Oh yeah, I'll actually give you a big clue. His name's Tom Clancy. Now, Tom Clancy, to me, was a best-selling international author. He's topped the New York Times charts so many times. His very first book is called Hunt for Red October. It's been turned into a great movie with Sean Connery. It's about a stolen submarine packed full of nuclear missiles sailing towards America. Sounds pretty exciting. A lot of his clear and present danger is about the president taking out drug runners from South America. He's got Jack Ryan's story that came out recently with Chris Pine starring inside it. He loves action stories. He loves adventure stories. And they're very much based on real life. However, I can see a lot of you guys are scratching your heads at it. They're going, oh, Tom Clancy, I recognise that name. About 20 years ago, Tom Clancy stopped writing books. And he started writing, any ideas? Video games. How mad is that? Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, Tom Clancy's The Division, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon. He realised, Tom Clancy, that writing books maybe 700 or 800 pages is fine, but people were getting into video games, and video games need plot and setting and characters. They're exactly the same as the books that he used to write. Maybe some of you played Division. It's where, funnily enough, it's about a pandemic in New York, and a squad of soldiers have got to get from one side of the city to the other side of the city, and you've got all these mad ghouls and zombies trying to stop them on the way. Plot, setting, characters. The squad have got to move through the city, and it's set in the future. The rules are the same. Plot, setting, characters. Anybody recognise this guy? Nah. Even if I said his name, Dave Jones. Any ideas? Dave Jones actually comes from Dundee. Technically, he lives just the other side of Stirling Castle now. He's got a huge big house. But he started a company called DMA Design. He's got a huge headquarters in Edinburgh now. And about 20 years ago, he created a video game called Lemmings, about these little creatures that used to fall off, and you had to build walls and dams and things to stop them jumping over the edge of the cliff. Then he took the money he made from Lemmings and he invested it in a new company called Rockstar North. Now, I know some of you are going, I know that game. No, you don't. It's an 18. You're not allowed to play GTA, and I'm not allowed to mention it. You're not allowed to play it, but I know you do. Think about that for a moment. The biggest selling video game series in the world was made here in Scotland. It was made in Aberdeen University in Dundee. You don't need to live in New York or London or Los Angeles to be a video game designer. You can do it here. You start by telling stories using plot, setting and characters. There's the Rockstar North headquarters in Edinburgh. It's at the bottom end of the Royal Mile. It's on our doorstep. Plot, setting, characters. Nail these ones and then, my goodness, your stories will be absolutely fantastic. Right. We've moved on. We've got our plot and our setting of characters. The next thing you need to think about is genre. Genre. It's a French word. Actually, it makes you sound French when you say it. Genre. Genre in French means a sort of or type of. So before you begin, you think, what type of stories do I like? What kind of movies do I enjoy? You might have fairy tale or horror, an animal story, sci-fi, science fiction, where you take a little bit of science and you imagine what it's going to look like in the future. Thrillers. Actually, there are 32 different genre types, and you can mix and match them. Can you guys think of any more different types of genre. You might have detectives. You might have a bank robbery type story. They'd fall underneath crime. You might have a action. I've mentioned action and adventure, like Tom Clancy's books and video games. You might have spy stories like James Bond, westerns, cowboys and Indians. Science fiction might even draw in aliens if you're out in a spaceship in another part of the universe. You might look at, well, one of my favourites, comedy. I love a good laugh. I love watching. Here's one my wife likes. Romance. She likes a good rom-coms. You could take romance and comedy and you put them together, it becomes a rom-com. So mix and match your genre types and you can come up with even more ideas. Here's one. I watched a movie last month. It was called Cowboys and Aliens. This is a group of writers sitting in a room thinking, what have we never had before? Oh, we've had westerns, we've had plenty of westerns, we've had lots of science fiction and alien stories. Wait a minute, cowboys and aliens. Let's just stick them together so you can mix and match. Here's another one. Rom-zom-com. It's a romantic zombie comedy. You're not allowed to watch it because it's a 15, unless you are actually over the age of 15. But a rom-zom-com would be Shaun of the Dead, because it's funny and it's got zombies in it and Shaun's got to go and get his girlfriend back. So mix and match your genre types. Once you've done that, the next thing you have to think about is plotting. How does your story have a start and a middle and an end? First of all, you set the scene. You introduce your characters. You engage your reader. Because right at the beginning, you've got to make your reader sit up and go, wow, what's going on? Tell me more. Because sometimes if you've got a book and you're not really enjoying it, you kind of switch off after the first chapter or two. So as writers, you guys have got to hook. This is what it's called. The first page is like a hook. The first line is a hook. It drags the reader into the rest of the story. Then you've got to have a problem. If you don't have a problem in your story, it's going to be a bit dull. So you've got to come up with a really good problem to give your story some flow. Something that your hero or your heroine has got to solve by the end of the tale. Next, how bad can it be? If you take one problem, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 problems. Build upon layer of your story, so it's like you're climbing up a mountain in order to get to the other side. Finally, how do you solve it? We'll talk about that in a moment, but there's generally 3 different ways to finish your story. And you want to have a nice little ribbon that you can tie the whole thing together with. This is called a story map. A story map helps you get your ideas down on paper before you start writing. Please don't just rush into it. A lot of teachers see stories where kids are like, oh, great idea, rush it, and then they run out of ideas halfway through. Or teachers see some school, the kid rushes in and then they get another idea halfway through the story and the story goes off in a completely different direction. So you change tangent, you lose the thread. So plan your stories first. Gripping introduction, you introduce your characters, write your ideas down. What's the problem? How bad can it be? And finally, how do you solve it? Gripping introduction. Please, do not start your story with one day. A lot of kids will start with one day, one morning, one night. It's the most boring thing people will read ever. Teachers read it all the time. Like, oh man, one day, one morning. No, do not use one day at all, ever. Then you've got to introduce the character. If I was to start my story with, one day the school exploded. Does that sound quite exciting? No, it's rubbish. First of all, I said one day. The second, I said the school exploded. I've just told you what's happened. Don't just tell people what happens. What you've got to try and do is lead them in. Let the reader work it out for themselves. Let me see if I can make that better. Instead of one day the school exploded, how about glass shattered across the playground, a fireball ripped through the corridors, slates on the roof blew off in 100 different directions, a pillar of black smoke stretched 200 metres into the sky, and the school disappeared into a hole in the ground. Was that better than one day the school exploded? Yeah, because hopefully I was giving you ideas. I was giving you little visualisation clues so you could picture the words inside that little movie camera behind your eyes. Let's move on. Introduce the characters. Little Bob. Little Bob didn't realise his world was about to be turned on its head as the explosion blew him out of bed that day. He ran downstairs. His mum and dad were missing. That's a bit odd. He bolted into the street, but the street was deserted. Where was everybody? All he saw was a trail of red footprints leading towards the hole in the ground where his school once stood. Wow, do you like that? I'm getting quite excited, actually. So many problems. We're building layer upon layer. Little Bob is the last kid on earth. Where are his parents? Where are the villagers? What is this trail of red footprints? Is it paint? Is it ketchup? Is it blood? We don't know yet. But we've got to keep reading. Make it even worse. Create more problems for our main characters. Bob crept towards the hole. He peered inside. It's hideous. It's up to you. You can make your stories as exciting as you want. They can be adventurous. They might be crime stories. They might be adventures or action. Or, it's hideous. It's an army of pink fluffy unicorns. It could be fairy tales. It's up to you. Whatever you love writing about. Until finally, you've got to have a solution. There's got to be a nice ending. Now, one way to end your stories would be to use a cliffhanger. Right? Dun, dun, dun. What I don't want you to do with cliffhangers is just get bored of your story and write to be continued. That's cheating. You've got to have a proper ending of your story, a little thread hanging, and you've genuinely complete your story in the next tale or the next chapter. Don't just write to be continued ... Actually, on that point, can anybody tell me what we call ... Well done, a couple of you shouted that. Ellipsis. Right? Whenever you see an ellipsis, ... is a cliffhanger. Dun, dun, dun. The most obvious way to finish your story would be a happy ending. Most stories end up with a happy ending, whether the couples get together or they have a party or a celebration. Another way you can end your story is a bad ending. Or actually, there's three. If you get really down into the detail, there's 3 different ways to end your story in a bad way. You can have a sad ending, you can have a bad ending, or you have a mad ending. A sad ending might be 1 or 2 of your main characters die. So maybe poor little Bob. Oh, he was rescuing his friends, he saved the school, but then he died trying. Oh. A bad ending might be little Bob rescues his school, saves all the teachers, but then him and the entire class die trying. And then if we go right to the very tip of it, everybody dies. Poor little Bob clips the wrong wire on the bomb and the whole country is destroyed, exploded, up in a big puff of smoke. The point is, difference. 400 years ago, there was a guy called William Shakespeare. Now, he was the most famous playwright in the world, still is the most famous playwright in the world, and he wrote 2 different types of plays. He didn't do cliffhangers, he did comedies and he did tragedies. His comedies were just happy endings, basically. His tragedies were mad, sad or bad. A sad one would be Romeo and Juliet. You know, a boy and a girl in Italy love each other, want to be together, at the end they both die. Oh, sad. A bad ending, lots of people die, would be Macbeth, the Scottish play. At the end of that, Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Banquo, King Duncan, lots of people are dead. And then his maddest play, his most famous play ever, is Hamlet. And Hamlet spends about 4 hours wondering, shall I go and avenge my father's death? Until half an hour to go, right at the end of the play, when he's done nothing but worry, suddenly it's an absolute bloodbath. People are like, everybody on the stage at the end of the play, dead. So you can have a happy ending, you can have a tragic ending, which is sad or bad or mad, or you can have a cliffhanger and dun dun dun. 3 different ways to end your story. But when you start writing your story, it's good to have an idea how your story is going to end so you can follow the path. You'll know how it ends, but you'll drag the reader along, and they'll never actually work out how it's going to end until they get to that final chapter. So that's the story map. We're now at the halfway stage. We've looked at how fantastic stories can be. We've looked at choosing your genre type. And we've looked at plotting your story from the start to the middle to the end. Take a break just now. Go off. Have a little bite to eat. And when you join me again, the next thing we're going to look at is creating fantastic characters. See you soon.